and I have always talked about going back and
You should.
doing that. And
You
that's,
should.
yeah, that's definitely something. And it's kind of weird because at the time it was like really sort of cyberpunk cutting edge, and I was just like, man, this is pretty sweet. And over the years, you know, things have kind of caught up with but I
Yeah,
still
but a
think
lot
there's
of
some meat
stuff-
on those bones. You
Not
know?
everything, though. There's a lot of stuff in there that's still in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Surprised to see that it's not implausible. You just haven't got there yet.
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's definitely something that we've talked about, and now that I've got a relationship with Boom, and they're kind of like allowing me a little bit more flexibility, and my relationship with 12 Gauge, that's something that I'm definitely thinking about doing.
Oh, yes.
All right. I'll tell somebody. I'll tell the guys. We got one fan. One issue.
One sale for sure.
2 issues.
How much
sold.
cash? How much cash you got?
How many issues?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm wondering when you get your script and you get into the storytelling process, I'm getting from you that, for example, if you draw a character, before you just read it, you draw, you get to a backstory.
Well, the
How do you get into really bringing that energy on your pages?
Well, the thing about it is I don't get so too deep into the backstory, but I get really into exactly what is necessary for this to happen, and I mean, you know, anyone who's a creator is an observer. If you want to create something, if you want to write, or if you want to draw, more than likely that means you've paid so much attention to so much stuff, and you've noticed patterns, and you'd like to talk about those. So a lot of times, like when I get scripts from Doug will, like, you know, talk about the character a little bit, give me a little bit of sort of root inspiration for the character, and then I just sort of sit back and go, man, okay, for this girl, man, it sort of reminds me of a girlfriend that I had, and it sort of reminds me of this person that I knew, and it sort of reminds me of this, and that affects everything. It affects, like, what's cool is there's certain patterns that you just notice, and when those patterns exist, you automatically start making assumptions, and more than likely those assumptions are right. You know, so when Doug says, yeah, I want to do this character Lacey, and she's crazy, you know, my thing is, okay, well, first of all, she's blonde. You know,
From your experiences.
yeah, from my experiences. You know, and not only is she blonde, I want to make it obvious that her hair is naturally black. You know, but she dyes it blonde, and like then you just start like pulling all these things from your experience into the character, so that when I draw a picture of the character, just that picture, the storytelling already starts happening in your head. You know, now when you actually start seeing that character in an adventure, you're bringing so much to the table, and you're bringing that much to the table because chances are I've packed in a lot of stuff that I've experienced and you've experienced also. You know, so that's kind of how I like, you know, kind of unpacking characters.
Actually, kind of piggybacking on that.
Okay.
Because the thing that's, for me, is really big draw. You have very provocative action sequences where they chase and fights, and for me, they actually you show a lot of really great. It's not quite moment-to-moment action because you do it better than that, because you really settle on better than a moment, slightly higher than reality, but it's just the perfect moment in between the action. But it carries like it's the hand of the sea.
Yeah, yeah.
And it helps in showing each character's motivation, because you see a lot of thinking and fighting, there's a character development. So I'm just wondering how much time you spend choreographing a lot of these chases and sequences to build the character, because you see the decision making along with knowing exactly when the pause is, so it feels like because like old school comic was basically a big punch. Everything right
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
and everything's a big punch, or you can do like a hyper speed where it's just all these little moments that don't have the impact.
Well, there's a lot going on there, and this is a really big thing that Doug. This is like a conversation from years ago that we got into, but one of the things that we noticed is that storytelling ends when a fight scene starts. You know, you have the reason why these characters are in the fight, but then when they actually get to the fight, there is no story. There's a gallery. You know, it's as if you're walking through a gallery and you walk up to one painting and you go, that's beautiful. And then you go to the next painting and go, ooh, that's beautiful too. And the next and the next and the next. Like you said, punch, 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 punch. So these are images, and images of action, but they're not connected. They don't build to a bigger thing. And not only do they not build to a bigger thing, it's just one person trying to or punching another person, and that happening over and over and over again. So there's no connective tissue, there's no writing, and there's no story. So guaranteed, there's no storytelling, and storytelling is the thing that we want to have at all times. So one of the things that I always try to do, and Doug is really good about this, is saying, this is what this fight scene is about. You know, this is what's at stake in the fight scene. This fight scene is about this thing, this emotion, this control, this loss of control, loss of love, whatever. So you have that. And now, because I've worked with Doug a lot, what I end up doing is most writers don't write that. You know, most writers write up to a certain point, and then they say, and then they fight. You know? So what I always try to do is really think about what the fight scene is about. And then the second thing that I do is, and I'm going to give it away, my fight scenes are shorter than most fight scenes in comics, because what people like is people like martial arts films, where it's just like, hoo, ha, hoo, ha, hoo, ha, for like, 10 minutes, and they try to illustrate that, but you can't illustrate that because you're not illustrating the connective tissue. So they're kind of going, ooh, that's a good punch, fast forward, that's a good punch, fast forward, that's a good punch. But what I try to do is I try to go, what's at stake in this fight scene, the storytelling in this fight scene, what is the best way to show that? And let me do a single move or maybe two maneuvers for the person to get from here to there. And I can illustrate that a panel at a time. And then when I get to the end of the fight scene, you see this thing has happened. So you're able to kind of go, from this panel, I can see this panel. From this panel, I can see this panel, and so forth and so on, until you get to the end. So it's like really, for using an overused word in comics, it's decompressing the fight scene and really thinking about what the fight scene is about.
Do you have examples like that, your work, and how you thought about, do you have examples that shows your work and then what you were thinking and planning for you know what I mean, to make that happen? Because
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's in Wednesday's comics, that might be something you'll remember. Walt Simonson wrote like the first page of that was setting up this elaborate castle. You see this room in this elaborate castle, and then you see this room in this elaborate castle, and then this room in this elaborate castle, and then we see this room, and Jason Blood and Catwoman or Selena Kyle are in this room and talking, and that's cool, and that's sort of a comic book standard. But my thing was, there's no storytelling there. So what I decided to do was take this cat, and you start with the cat's in a window, and then you see the cat walking past this room. Then you see the cat walking past this room.
So you give them a reason why.
Yeah, so that cat becomes a connective tissue between those scenes. You're watching this cat walk through the castle. So I give you what Walt wants, which is show you this beautiful, elaborate castle. But then the last panel, on the next page, is Selena Kyle driving away from the castle. The cat's sitting in her car, but you see the cat's got a little camera, on its necklace. So now it's like, oh, you saw the cat walk through there, and now you see why the cat was walking through.
Nice.
So it's connective tissue that sort of connects all the scenes and gives you a reason for why you're watching this cat walk through.
Because initially in the script it said that the camera.
No, initially in the script there wasn't a cat. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
When
Exactly.
the writer sees, when you return art, does your editor go, what the hell's this cat doing?
No, because the thing about it, that's the cool thing about story, and I think that's the thing that people miss about story, and that's the thing. Let me bash on somebody here, like Rob Liefeld. People hate his art. They just think the guy sucks.
No, No.
But
And
what's
it's
really,
famous enough.
but what's really cool is Rob is a storyteller. And the nice thing about it is if you have storytelling, you don't need good art. You know, your art can totally suck, but if you have storytelling, then it's great. You know, guys like Mignola doesn't draw anything, but he's a hell of a storyteller. Frank Miller's art is actually ugly, but he's a hell of a storyteller. So really, the reason why 90% of the people are reading comics is because of the storytelling, not because of the writing or the art.
You feel that the logical progression from that then is that some artists could be, say this right, fantastic pinup artists, but because they can't tell a story, they don't catch.
Yeah, and in fact, I think if you are a fantastic pinup artist, you are detrimental to storytelling. Travis Charest, who I think is, I will buy every book that Travis Charest will ever do. I think Travis Charest is the best artist working in the industry today. Absolutely breathtaking artwork. But when I buy Travis Charest's art, I'm not buying any story. I'm buying a collection of beautiful panels of art. And when I read, maybe I shouldn't even use the term read. You know, when I look through a Travis Charest book, I don't read the story. I've never read a story that I own every book he's ever done, but I have never read a single story, and I will not read them. You know, but Frank Miller, I can't pick up Sin City and look at the art. I try to look at the art, but then I start reading it. So there, storytelling is achieving one thing, you know, whereas art without storytelling achieves something completely different. So as an artist, I actually take a look at the covers that I do. I'm going to do the art completely different on a cover, because on a cover, I'm like, look at how much of a badass I am. Look at me. But if I do interiors, I pull back on the art. I get sometimes a little bit more cartoony, a little bit more abstract with the art, because I want, if the art is too good, the art is going to stop you, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to go, wow, look at how well he drew that face. And if you're saying, look at how well he drew that face, chances are you're stuck on that panel that you should be bouncing off of.
Awesome. How do you know when to end the story, you know, to find that perfect ending? Because I feel like some comics nowadays always focus
Well,
on make it last.
to know how to end the story, the end of the story is actually the beginning of the story. Like, what you have to know is the end is the most important thing.
The ending is paramount.
Yeah, so if you don't have the end of the story, you don't have the beginning of the story. If you don't have the end of the story, you don't even have a story. So it's massively important that you know, Doug and I, we generally come up, it's like we're the stupidest guys on the planet, you know, because every story.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
You stand next to me. You
Well-
see my right side.
Well, every story, like we don't have a character like Hellboy that we're going to do stories about for the rest of our lives. Every story that Doug comes up with, he ends. You know, and every story that I want to work on ends. So it's kind of like, that's not very smart. You know, you want a character that resets at the end of every story. But I think story has to make a statement. You know, and the end of your story is that statement. You know, you have to say, this is it. You know, because what you're saying, you're the guy. You're the guy you're the shaman, you know, you're the village leader. You're the guy that gets up on the rock, and you're the guy that says to all your people that are looking to you to figure out how to survive, this is what you need to do. And if you do this, you will make love, and your genes will go on to infinity. If you don't do this, you will die alone. You know, so your story's ending is basically making that statement. If you don't have that statement, then you don't really have a story.
If you're ever struggling with that, listen to your characters. They will tell you when to end the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a character that I did, but I'm just always thinking, can I make him or her last, or should I just find a perfect ending? Just
Well, something to also be concerned about, and this is, I think, another problem with the comic book industry, is characters exist without stories, and that's a problem. because if a character exists without a story, that's actually not a character. You know, that's just a collection of cool things. You know, that, to a certain extent, is just like art, writing. Character is a tool, and that tool is for storytelling. So if you create your character, and you have your character exist as a thing completely apart from storytelling, then you're back to Travis Terrace. You know, then you're back to something that's like, where someone's gonna look at your story and go, oh man, that's such a cool character, oh man, that character's so awesome. But they're not gonna actually experience anything. They're not gonna feel anything. You know, you're not gonna inspire them at all. They're just gonna be characters.
Our mascot.
Okay, I'm a fast learner, I'm sure you read it, but I'm going to get some script and that. You know, like you said, the story ends where the fight begins.
Yes.
And I always, you know, like at the moment, I'm all about being on the angle and all that stuff. And then when I have to draw dialogue, I go, okay. You know, like, all right, this head's talking to this head. And
I do.
This angle, which is this and that. You know, like I'm just sort of copying whatever, just going to create variety.
Yeah.
Over the line of action. So, if I, you know, is there something deeper?
Oh, dude, like
Pet peeves right
yeah,
here.
that is like the biggest. Like to me, if a writer drops a dialogue piece on me, I'm like, sweet, because in my opinion, what ends up happening is writers, they don't pay attention to the dialogue sequences. When writers start writing dialogue sequences, they're like, oh, my words are so awesome. Check out these words, and I'm gonna have this person turn this phrase. Oh, you know, and like, you know, they're so enthralled by how beautifully they've crafted this sentence and how beautiful they got this play between the characters that they don't write. I mean, the characters are literally two characters walk into a room and say all this juicy stuff. You know, so writers aren't writing characters doing, you know, so the action stops when dialogue begins. And to me, that is so awesome because you have like a perfect storm where the writer has given a lot of great writing, but they've left the playground clear. You know, so to me, like my action sequences are dialogue sequences. That's when I can really get in there and do some awesome things. Whereas the action sequences, then writers tend to get in your way because, you know, the writer's saying, oh, and Batman does this somersault and does a split in midair and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. So the writer's writing these disconnected panels. So now I run the risk of running afoul of the writer because I'm going to go, nope, you know, Batman throws one punch, you know. So it's just like dialogue pieces are like the most awesome pieces. Like I just got a thing in Dayman where they wrote like the worst thing that you can imagine, which is a bunch of characters in a conference room talking. And I was just like, oh man, ooh, what are they talking about? And they're basically talking about the fact that they are predators. They are, how are they going to gain power over this other family? And not only that, but in that writing, there's this one character, and she's the girl, but she's power hungry. She wants all these guys in the room to know that she's the badass. And all the guys are much more bigger than her, more powerful than her, or placed in good positions. But she has to like, oh, no, no, no. And I'm like, sweet. So what I did with that scene was I was just like, okay, first of all, it's going to be a conference room, but one wall of the conference room is going to be a shark tank. You know, so while these characters are talking, you just see these big sharks swim around in the background. So that has a natural like, ugh, you know, these are predators. But then I have all the guys sitting, but she's standing the whole time. You know, and then when one guy stands up and challenges her, she like basically, the guy's talking, and while he's talking, she's not paying attention to him. She reaches over to this bowl of chocolates and just slowly opens up the chocolate and just eats it. You know, like, you know, I don't even care about you. You know, you don't even threaten me. You know, so it's just like that to me was taking that scene, which is just the worst scene you can imagine, but actually turning it into something. So I treat dialogue sequences like fight sequences.
That's a pet peeve of mine too. So like even when I'm writing a dialogue scene, I never say headshot. Every panel in a story should reveal character, even when they're talking. They should be doing something that reveals character. What they're doing with their hands, are they picking, you know, what can you do to reveal character in that scene? That's what I always focus on.
Yeah, yeah.
you guys obviously work together a lot, so.
Yeah,
you guys-
and we're gonna wrap it up, so this is gonna be the last question.
Do you guys ever have like a conversation after reading the script, and do you have a theme conversation, like whether it be a dialogue or action sequence, to like kind of pull the subtleties between like who's angry, who's cruel, and who's desperate? And who's aggressive?
Hopefully you have that conversation beforehand with the writer, and I mean I really suggest working close with the writer, because you can really find out where the energy is. Because a lot of times, again, I can't reiterate, the writer is in charge of writing, and the artist is in charge of art. Storytelling is that other thing, and when the writer writes something, the writer is trying to inspire the artist to do that storytelling. So it's really a good idea to figure out what is the storytelling that we're going for. What are we trying to achieve here? And that's the most elusive part, I think, of the craft that we're in. But like, you know, Doug and I, we have conversations before, during, and after the story. When Doug starts writing, Doug goes off on his own, and while Doug is writing, Doug is sitting there going, oh man, Brian's gonna just flip out when he sees this. Boom! You know, and then I'll get it and I'll go, oh no, you didn't. And then I'll sort of sit back and start drawing stuff, and I'll just like, oh man, Doug thought. You know, he thought he took it, but man, and boom, I'll just drop it back on him. So. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, which page did you mention?
No, that's exactly the books, like the ride feels like that. I can show you. Like,
Yeah. And that's, so you read the first ride.
I read all of them.
So you know the splash page with Lacey. That didn't start out that way. It started out where she was standing in the seat of the car, and I said, what, something like, there's a car flipping behind her that's on fire, and she's having the time of her life.
Yeah, and his dialogue, Doug wrote in the script, clearly she's getting off on the violence.
That's
And
what I
I'm
said,
like,
yeah.
Okay. You know, and I was just like, okay, well then I'm gonna have her like masturbating and swinging her head around, you know, while the car's exploding, and I'm like,
No, then you turned it into a bus.
oh yeah. Sorry about that.
So yeah, and that's what's great about like when you have a collaborative effort, and I like working really close with artists too, because sometimes you work with draftsmen, was what Brian calls them, where they just kind of interpret your script without really thinking or putting any feeling into it. And I like to work with somebody because I want that kind of energy.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be able to say, hey, Brian, I think you can't match this. Yeah. And I hope he goes, this is better than what you thought.
Oh yeah. But if any of you guys are artists, I'm, you know, I really got where I am from talking to a lot of like great old guys who are dead right now. And if you guys, if there's anything, if you want me to review your portfolio or, you know, have more of this type of conversation, feel free to drop by the table. I always try to take some time aside to try to help you know, young up and comers up as much as possible.
What's your table number?
GG 14. Yes. I suppose I should.
Thanks, everybody.